The doctor stopped writing. That was the first thing the cowboys noticed. Not the girl, not the guards, not the shackles cutting into her wrists. The doctor. He had been through Europe, North Africa, Guadalcanal. He had examined men pulled out of mass graves. But when the scale needle stopped trembling and settled at 68 pounds, his pencil froze in midair. "She's 15, the translator said quietly. The doctor looked up. The girl stood barefoot on the wooden platform, ribs visible through skin stretched too tight. Her head shaved, her uniform hanging on her like it belonged to someone already dead. 68 pounds. At 15. Outside the barn, the Texas sun burned white hot. Cattle lowered. Spurs jingled. Men who had broken horses and Berry brothers stood silent, hats in their hands. One of them whispered, almost angry, "That ain't a prisoner." That was August 1945. The war was already over. But for this girl, it had only just arrived. The Pacific War did not begin with bombs. It began with hunger. Japan was an island empire that had industrial ambitions and no oil, no iron, and not enough food to sustain its population. Every year, the math grew worse. Every year, the military demanded more. By the 1930s, Japan's leadership believed expansion was not a choice, it was survival. China, Manchuria, Southeast Asia. Each invasion fed the next one, and each one consumed more lives. By the time Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the country was already fully militarized. Children were taught to die before surrender. Girls were trained to serve in factories and field hospitals as messengers, cooks, cleaners. Not soldiers, but not civilians either. By 1944, the tide had turned. American submarines strangled Japan's supply lines. Rice shipments vanished. Fishing fleets were destroyed. Cities burned under firebombing raids. The home islands were starving. Teenagers were pulled from schools and sent to military support units across the Pacific. They were told they were helping the emperor. They were told surrender was worse than death. They were not told how little food there would be, or how alone they would become. For the girl, her name was Aiko Tanaka. The war did not erupt in fire. It crept in quietly. First, her teacher disappeared. Then the lunch portions shrank. Then the letters from her father stopped coming. By early 1945, she was assigned to a coastal logistics unit in the Philippines. She was 14 when she arrived. She never held a weapon. Her job was simple. Carry water, clean medical tools, translate basic English phrases learned from old textbooks. By March, the Americans had cut off the island completely. Food was rationed down to spoonfuls of rice mixed with leaves and sawdust. Soldiers collapsed during roll call. Dysentery spread. Malaria followed. When American forces landed, the Japanese command vanished into the jungle. They left the girls behind. The fighting lasted days. Then silence. Aiko hid in a drainage ditch for 3 nights, drinking rainwater and eating ants. When U.S. Marines found her, she tried to stab herself with a sharpened spoon. She missed. She weighed less than a sack of grain. The war ended suddenly, not gently. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The emperor spoke on the radio. Most civilians had never heard his voice before. It sounded small, fragile, surrender. For American forces, it meant processing millions of prisoners, refugees, and displaced civilians across Asia and the Pacific. Not all could stay where they were found. Disease, starvation, security risks. Some detainees, especially minors attached to military units, were transferred for medical stabilization. That is how Aiko crossed the Pacific. She traveled in the belly of a transport ship, wrapped in blankets, drifting in and out of consciousness. A Navy nurse recorded her pulse as irregular but persistent. She arrived in California skeletal, feverish, and silent. The Army had no facility ready for her, so they sent her inland to a ranch. The ranch had once trained cavalry horses. Now it held prisoners. German POWs worked the fields. Italian soldiers repaired fences. And in one small converted barn, a 15-year-old Japanese girl sat on a cot staring at her hands. She did not cry. The cowboys noticed that first. She ate slowly, terrified the food would disappear if she swallowed too fast. When milk was offered, she shook. Lactose had disappeared from her diet years earlier. The medical exam took 20 minutes. The results took seconds to understand. Severe muscle atrophy, advanced malnutrition, stunted growth, dental damage from starvation, internal parasites, signs of prolonged dehydration. The doctor removed his glasses. She should be dead, he said. One cowboy, a man who had lost a son in Normandy, stepped outside and vomited behind the stable. At night, Aiko screamed in Japanese. No one understood the words, but everyone understood the terror. She slept curled like a child much younger than 15. When thunder rolled, she hid under the bed. When boots approached, she flinched. One nurse later wrote, she had been alive too long for what she had endured. The war was over on paper, but it lived on in bodies. Aiko stayed on the ranch for 3 months. She gained weight slowly. Her hair grew back unevenly. She learned one English word first, water. The cowboys taught her how to ride a horse, not to train, not to work, just to feel tall again. In December 1945, she was repatriated to Japan. Her mother was dead. Her home was gone. Her country was unrecognizable. She never spoke publicly, but in a Red Cross interview decades later, she said one sentence. The Americans thought the war ended when the guns stopped. For me, it ended when I was allowed to eat without fear. War statistics do not weigh 68 pounds. Treaties do not scream at night. Victory does not fix a child's bones. This story is not about mercy or cruelty. It is about what happens when nations decide survival is worth sacrificing children. Aiko Tanaka did not choose a war. The war chose her. And it left its mark long after the world decided to move on. That is the true cause of victory. Not the flags, not the parades, but the children who survive and must learn how to live again in bodies the war already tried to erase.